to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. It is Thursday. I am Matt Norlander. That is Adam Finklestein. If you're watching live or watching after the fact on YouTube, our lead editorial director at 247 Sports on all things scouting, no matter the level. He's on board. GP's on vacation, by the way. So yes, we did have an episode earlier this week with our top 25 stories since 2000. That was pre-taped, but happy to have Fink aboard here. Welcome back on the pod, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I got the draft this week. I got recruiting this week. This is an exciting time.
You've been all around. You've been jet setting, my man. You were at Top 100 camp down in Rock Hill last week, and then you flew over to Colorado Springs, right? So you've only gotten back home in the past 48 hours or so?
I came home. There was a 36-hour break there for fourth grade graduation, which I attended, and then I got right back on the plane the next day and out to Colorado. But listen, I get to call this work. I've got no complaints.
No doubt about it. You just said fourth grade graduation. I've recently learned that's become more of a thing. Like, I assume like you, like me, when we were growing up, fifth grade was the graduation, but now they're looking to combine fifth and sixth and then seventh and eighth as middle school. Is that the situation with one of your kids?
School is 2 through 4.
Okay.
So it was like the end of the school thing, and it wasn't really graduation per se, but I don't know. There was a thing that parents were supposed to go to because he's done with the building. Yeah. I was there. I didn't get deducted parent points. That's what's most important. Yeah,
it sounds like a hell of a scout you got going on. We have more intel coming on the actual draft picks here. Big mailbag episode ahead. Before we do that, though, I want to touch on a couple of talking points. And as we record this here on Thursday morning, the Ace Bailey situation has really become inflamed in the past 24 to 48 hours. We'll work that in, I think, with one of our draft questions overall. I think as we record here live, that's now become the most intriguing talking point in NBA circles. So we'll get there. But I want to go big picture here, Fink, for you. Yeah. This draft class, I had my mock earlier this week, and I addressed this in that a little bit. But I want your opinion relative to the last 8 to 10 years worth of draft classes. How do you think this year I'm not talking top 5. I'm not talking top 10. I'm talking the pool of players, 70, 80 deep that are under consideration to go and be selected next Wednesday and Thursday. How would you grade this draft class? Would you say it's great, pretty good, just okay, subpar, or poor? That's six different descriptions there. Where would you land on this?
I would go good, not great. And I think the narrative coming into this draft cycle, which for us, draft head like me, really began, a year, if not more ago. And the perception was that this was going to be a great draft. I do not think it is a great draft. I think it's a good draft. The reason it's a good draft is because of the talent at the very top, specifically Cooper and Dillon. The reason why it's not great is because the overall depth wasn't trending the way we hoped. And then you got hit with the implications of the NIL market. So now the depth, both in the end of the first round and even in the beginning of the second, like where you used to be able to find a rotation player or let me rephrase. You used to have a chance to find a rotation player. Sometimes you'd even be able to find a steal. I don't know that value's there in this year's draft. I still like it at the top. I don't think that once you get farther down the first round board and definitely into the second, that it has the same depth as other top classes.
I would agree with you. I see plenty of players, top 5 is one discussion, maybe even top 6 in this draft. I think there's a line of delineation there. I see players peppered throughout like the teens, a couple in the 20s, where I actually like those players relative to where they're projected and what they could be. But I got to say, like, to me, I would answer my own question here. I would put it subpar overall. I look into the second round of players, and I want to be clear on this. There will be guys selected in the second round that ultimately make really good careers for themselves. But I do not, like, as I was building out my mock, calling some sources, trying to accurately project, okay, where are these guys going to go? And are there guys right now that are between, say, 35 and 50 that I believe in, that teams might believe in, that I can jump up? I really had a hard time getting myself there, and I find myself underwhelmed, broadly speaking, by the overall class here. I mean, the guys that are populating the 55 to 65 to 70 spots overall, I don't know what it is. I don't find myself enthused. And I will say, in talking to a variety of NBA sources, Fink, there have been some who have disagreed with me, but I've had a couple of people in front office, you know, they say this with the benefit of saying it on background and not having their name attached to it, but there are a couple that are just not remotely intrigued or interested once you get past like 25 in this draft.
Yeah, I was gonna say like 40. And there's tiers, right? But to me, 40 is the mark where after 40, I'm not sure how many real NBA players there are. Like maybe you'll hit, but the chances aren't good. The other thing I would say about the scouts and NBA sources who have some optimism about the second round is, and this is in the weeds a little bit, but from the perspective of those guys, like inside an NBA front office, if you are in the scouting department, lots of times the GM or whoever the primary decision maker will, like they'll delegate the second round pick because they just don't have time to do the due diligence. So if you're someone who's trying to make a career for yourself and you're given the opportunity to quarterback that pick, nailing the pick is how you really expedite like the growth in your career. And so for those players in a market now where there's viewed as not much value, like if you're a third in somebody's front office and you nail your second round pick, well, you just fast tracked your career. So from that perspective, I understand why those scouts think it's exciting and you know, are hopeful that they have a diamond in the rough.
No doubt about it. We got a comment in the live chat here saying Cedric Howard, sleeper of the draft. Yes and no. I have a big time feature on Mr. Coward scheduled to publish, I believe, early Friday morning. So by the time you listen to this, maybe it's live. If you haven't gotten to it, please seek it out. Put a ton of work into it. And he is one of the most impressive players I have ever interviewed in more than 15 years doing this. We'll be super interested to see where he goes on draft night. We don't have a specific question directed toward his way, but he has got a very fascinating story. He's literally unprecedented. There's never been a player that has made the NBA and been selected in the first round with his path. It's just unbelievable. So that's a little bit of a tease for you. Before we get to the questions, I was curious on guys that you might be higher on or lower on than our consensus. We had our top 100 board published on Wednesday at cbssports.com on the CBS Sports app. Not if we could link the top 100 prospect rankings in this episode description on YouTube and in the audio feed after the fact so people can scan that. Give me a couple relative to our collective group. I think it was 6 or 7 of us that really sent in our prospect rankings to KB, Kyle Boone, and then he built it out there. Who are you higher on? Who are you lower on?
So I will say this, I thought we did a pretty good job. Like I was kind of disappointed when Boone sent me the list. I was like, man, this is too good. There's no easy ones for me to pick off here. Yeah. Generally speaking, I think the category that maybe we are too low on in general is the French kids, because, you know, like one of the narratives in this draft is like there's a lesser international influx. Well, not really. It's just that the NIL market brought Kasparas Jakučionis and Yegor Demin to college basketball. They would have been in the draft either way. They just would have been more mysteries because they wouldn't have played college basketball in the years before NIL. Still, though, I think there's a strong contingent from France that because they didn't play college basketball, maybe isn't getting talked enough about. Now, I thought our rankings, like Nolan Traore is a guy that a year ago we were talking about as a potential top 5 pick. And then he really kind of struggled out of the gates and his stock really dropped. I thought our rankings got him right, but generally speaking, I would say I'm ahead of the masses on him. I think we had him at around like 14 or something like that, which I think is about accurate. And also from France, I think players like Jean Berinja, if I'm saying that correctly.
Berinja, we can go with either one. No worries. It's better than GP. It's better than GP would have said it. So let's just roll.
Yeah, I know it's not Behringer, but you know, I think he is one that I am. You know, he was 23 on our big board. I don't think he'll be available at 23, and I think because he fits that archetype as the high-level athlete at the center position who can run the floor, protect the rim, and be a vertical spacer. That archetype has been hitting really consistently as of late. So I'm personally higher on him. The other kid from France that I don't mean kid, I mean they're young man from France that I'm personally higher on is Noah Penda. And that's because he may not have star potential, but once you get out of the top 2, 5, 7, whatever, like most people aren't star hunting at that point. And instead they're looking for a player who can come in and be a productive two-way piece. And Penda is someone in that category that I think is undervalued. We've got him at 31. I think he'll be a first-round pick. 6'7" and change with a 6'11" and a half wingspan, 245 pounds. He's got an NBA-ready body, NBA-ready length, monster hands, which is a big variable for a lot of these teams, and great playmaking metrics on the defensive end of the floor, and just a really smart player. So that all, now he's got to be able to make standstill threes, but all of that yields itself to being just a versatile role player.
For me, real quick on Beringer, I had him in the 20s and then talked to, so a mock published, I guess, on Monday or whatever. And then that night I talked to 2 NBA sources, and they're like, yeah, you're going to be wrong. Like, he's going to go in the top 20. So, so keep that in mind. The guys I'm higher on real quick. I have Tre Johnson at 2 on my board. So I go Flag, Johnson, Harper. And that's narrow, but just, it is universal out there. Like, when you look at mock drafts, and I think even general big boards, it's Flag, then Harper. I think Tre Johnson is going to grow into one of the 5 or so best scorers in the league. His work ethic, he is actually, let me ping this back to you real quick, Fink, and shoot it down if you disagree on a personal evaluation standpoint. But the intel that I have consistently gotten back on Johnson for the past year, I guess during high school stuff, maybe it was a little bit different. People thought maybe he was a little bit of a ball hog, but he has got upper echelon Flag level work ethic and determination. So when I hear that consistently about how maniacal he is about the process and the work ethic and living in the gym at a level that's even beyond most guys are going to be picked in the lottery. And I trust the shooting, I trust the form, I trust the scoring. That just narrowly puts me ahead of him than Harper at 2. What's your thought on Johnson real quick? And how far apart are we? Do you have him personally 4, 5, 6 on your board? Where does he land for you?
Yeah, I've got him between 4 and 6. I'm concerned. I would agree with you on a couple points. One, there's been definite maturation in his approach. He's always been a worker, but the worker has been focused on driven towards, on his individual game and not necessarily within the team concept. I think that there was some, his USA basketball experiences in high school where he got cut and didn't necessarily handle it well. That's a pretty well-known story at this point in time. So I think there's been a lot of maturation. I think that his passing exceeded my expectations this year at Texas. His efficiency as the number 1 scoring option, the counting stats, I was not surprised at. The fact that he did it with such efficiency, I was surprised at. I still think he's got to defend, and I still think there's room for growth. And listen, everybody with the Synergy account is going to jump on and cite the numbers and tell me I'm wrong here. But this was a shot maker who preferred to play off the dribble than the catch in high school. And I still think there's growth in terms of what he can do coming off various types of screening actions and playing off the catch. He hasn't fully weaponized that part of his game yet. And I understand the shooting numbers off the catch are good. I'm just saying, when you watch the tape, when you talk to the people at Texas and you say hey, for a guy who's got that type of shot making ability, is he as good as he should be coming off pin downs and staggers and various types of screening actions? The answer is not yet. He's still more comfortable shooting off the dribble. So there's little things. Listen, here's the thing about the draft. Everybody comes, you're right. Everybody says Cooper's 1, Dillon's 2. That's pretty much the consensus. But the only guarantee about this or any draft is that something unexpected will happen. So could Tre Johnson be the second best player to come out of this draft? Sure. That's within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that's, I mentioned this on HQ earlier this week. Just keep in mind, everyone, that, Flag is the obvious number 1 pick. He should be at the top of every board. Doesn't guarantee he'll be the best player coming out of this draft. He could, but there's no guarantee to it. It's always interesting to look back 3, 5, 7 years down the road. There's just no guarantee. He's the most likely, he's the most likely to have the best career, but there's no assurance that that's going to happen. That's why to me, draft season is so much fun.
Yeah, agreed. That's why when Nikola Jokic was a 2nd-round pick and he's the best player in the NBA, then you're there are no guarantees.
Correct. 2 more for me that I'm higher on, then let's get lower, and then we'll get to the questions. I have Asa Newell in the top 15. We have him at 21 on our overall board. I think his spectrum on where he could get selected is actually about as wide as any player that has lottery level type of stock. But I personally think Newell they aren't the same players, I think, but Newell could get to the NBA, really thrive in a way where it's like, oh, there's another guy who played at Georgia. Don't really remember much about his career, a la Anthony Edwards. He's not going to be Anthony Edwards, but you get what I'm saying there. I'm higher on him than our consensus. And then we have a question tied to Walter Clayton in the mailbag, so we'll save that in general.
I was saving him because
we have him at 31. To me, I have him in my top 20 on my big board overall. So that's not guys I'm higher on. Lower, I'll go first and then you. I'm a huge, again, this is just trying to look at this objectively, looking at the pool of draft prospects that we have out there, and there are going to be disagreements, but these are just guys that I am not nearly as high on as the consensus. Jeremiah Fears, I don't even for me, he is not a top 15 prospect in this class. I understand why he is there. I see what people see, but for me personally, I wouldn't have him in the top 15. Colin Murray Boyles, I'm also down on. I wouldn't have him as a top 20 prospect, maybe not even a top 25. That's just me. I know that's a major zag. Will Riley, I might have affected the standing, although I know I wasn't the only one, but I'm also not big on Will Riley. Got to see way more. He is benefiting from a ton of really good buzz leading into this over the past 6-7 weeks, and good for him. I'm just not there. And then one more, Rasheer Fleming. He could well hit. He is definitely he is benefiting from a lot of the measurables and the combine process. I get all that. He's out of St. Joe's. A lot of people couldn't pick Rasheer Fleming out of a lineup. Very possible he go in the first round. I just don't have a first round grade on him. So those are a few of my names. 2 or 3 for you. Who are you not as high on as the consensus?
So what's interesting about that is I did not write on who I was lower on. What I did write on is players that I thought would get drafted higher. Like I did 2 tiers, like guys I'm personally higher on, and then players I think will get drafted higher than where we have them. And 2 of the players you mentioned were in that list. Fears, I think we have him at number 11 on the big board. And I agree. I'm skeptical. But I also think he has a chance to get drafted between 5 and 8. And I'm very skeptical of that. Here's the thing with Fears. Let's just talk about from an archetype standpoint. If you believe if you're drafting in between 5 and 8, it's because you think he has like primary creator upside, which is what he was at Oklahoma, right? So you're trusting the ability to get in the paint, the burst, the pace, the creativity with the ball. And if you've watched him since high school, you're really encouraged, although he's still lean, by the way his body has begun to transform. That's been a talking point that I think is a little off base. Like everybody's saying like, oh, he's going to have to get a lot stronger. Well, if that's your narrative, it shows me you've only been watching him for a year, because it's true. But contextually, you're what's more accurate is to say he's going to have to keep getting stronger because his body is really transformed in the last 8 months even. What concerns me, though, is it's even less about the shooting and the defense, although those are both concerns. It's role, right? So, like, is he good enough to be the primary player in an NBA team, the primary creator on an NBA team? And in retrospect, let's remember, Scoot Henderson isn't good enough for that role. Like, this is a guy that at one point people were talking about taking over Brandon Miller, and even revisionist history is going to want to say this never happened, but it did. There were people saying like, should we think about taking Scoot Henderson over Wemby? 3 years later, that sounds absolutely crazy, but that was a talk once upon a time.
I remember polling like, I don't know, 13 NBA, not on Wemby, but on Miller. And I think it was like 8-5 Miller. And I remember one of the front office people, Eastern Conference, who was like dead set, like, it's Miller, it's not even close. And when I gave him the results, he's like, what are these people? Like, he was just, he was like, Scoot could be fine, but to me, it's not even close. It's interesting to go back just a few years removed from that. These Scoot and Brandon Miller convo, and I remember the Wemby stuff a little bit, but like that in particular, and now we see where it is now, and it
so that archetype, it's really hard to hit on, right? Yeah. Like, are you Ja Morant? And even then, like, what's your durability like? Are you and if you are not the primary creator, then what are you? Because you need the ball in your hand unless your game totally changes. You're not a great shooter off the catch yet, although I think he could be in time. And so then what are you? I think you're like the instant offense guy in the second unit, and that is not something that I'm willing to use a top 8 pick on. So he would be one that I would highlight from what you said. And the thing about Will Riley is that because of all the kids, and I won't go too deep into this because I think there's a question on it, because of all the kids who have gone back to college in the NIL market, there is a far smaller market in the 20s and I don't think there is a market in the early second round for teams that want to swing for the fences. Because that's like a philosophical question for teams at the end of the first round. Do we want to get a guy who we can allocate into a low salary, who can play immediate minutes, but has a lower ceiling? Or do we want to take a swing and see if at a high upside guy who's not ready to play right away, but may end up being a steal? If you are interested in the latter, Will Riley is now like one of the very few names on your board, because guys like, Tahad Pettiford, LeBaron Philon, all these guys went back to school. And there's not a whole lot of high upside swings like Will Riley. I have significant concerns too, but with his perimeter size, his ability to make shots in bunches when he gets going, I understand he was under 33% on the season, and even some like flashes of playmaking late in the season, there's an upside there. But there's certain, I'll just say it plainly, there's bust potential there too. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of guys like him in this draft.
All right. We asked for your questions. You delivered. We've got a whole group of them here, and we're going to get to those. Top 5 stuff, Ace Bailey. I referenced that. We'll get into that. Some second round, some college stuff. There's a good little variety here. Happy to have Fink on the show. So we'll get to the questions from the mailbag. First, let's get to a word from our partners, Nada. Let's do it. We'll talk to you right after the break.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
Let's dive right in here. Steven from Virginia asks, where's the highest VJ Edgecombe could get drafted? Could he go number 2?
No.
Yeah.
There was, I think his highest is 3. And I think that Dylan Harper will go 2. I think the only question is whether the Spurs take him, which it seems like they will, or whether they will trade off. I think it was Fran Fraschilla who tweeted a couple weeks ago that VJ was in the mix at 2. I do not believe that to be the case at this point in time. I think that especially with Ace Bailey not working out for Philadelphia, he will be in the mix at 3. And I also think Philadelphia's pick is on the market, so there's an opportunity for somebody to trade up. I actually think that VJ's range is pretty small. Like, I think Charlotte would take him at 4, and there's a chance that Philly or somebody else takes him at 3. So I think it's between 3 to 5 for VJ Edgecombe.
Okay. Why not let it fly? Ask. And a number of these, by the way, came from Blue Sky. We appreciate everyone over there. Finkelstein is also prominent over on that social media platform.
Am I? Shout out Zach Sandberg, who helps me with my Blue Sky account.
You do some stuff. Oh, I didn't realize you were outsourcing your social media posting.
Oh, that's my guy, man. He teaches me how to do. I'm like, I'm the old guy now. I was like, what is this thing? And he's like, oh, just do it this way. So it's great.
Okay, well, someone representing you is on there. So regardless, okay, why not let it fly? Ask. Obviously, Spurs are going Harper at 2, but what would y'all do at 14? First of all, I never say y'all, so apologies for that. Wing shooting, Coward, Nick Clifford, Liam McNeely. What about a backup big like Sorber, Berenger? Trade out. As a Spurs fan, I'd love if we could get Kalkbrenner or a Reno type, but 14 seems a reach. What say you, Fink?
I say that fan's got a pretty good idea of what's going on here, because I think especially if they take Harper, floor spacing is got to be at a premium, right? Because the big question around Harper is how does he fit with Steph Castle and De'Aaron Fox, none of which are really known as floor spacers. Mm-hmm. And with Wemby in particular, you need to space that floor in order to really highlight what he could be on the offensive end. Now, I will say, remember, they let Wemby really shoot but he took a lot of threes last year. So the lane is open for those guards to attack the rim because they let him shoot. But I think a wing who can stretch the floor is certainly on the table. Someone like Coward. I've mocked Liam McNeely there a couple of times, which I know is higher than most people have Liam, but I think he would fit. There's a chance Coward is off the board at 14. I also think another big to get yourself some depth there would make a lot of sense. There's been speculation that they might be interested in Kaman Maluach. He will not be on the board at 14. They move up. They've got a treasure trove of future assets. So like they can move off this pick. They can move up. They could do a lot of different things. But I do think those are the 2 buckets that you will see this pick come from is a backup big or a shooting wing.
I mocked Ace and Newell there. He didn't have great 3-point numbers in his one only year, but he could be movable as a big piece there. But maybe that's a reach. I do think that's McNeely's ceiling. I think that is his best case scenario is going at 14. Eric Diener asks, as a Sixers fan, what do you think they do at number 3? I know this is a loaded question with the Embiid situation, but I think Maluach and Knueppel would be great fits. Do you think someone like Tre Johnson has a higher ceiling than Jared McCain, who's already on the roster? And then let's get into the Ace Bailey stuff. Jonathan Givony was the first to report that, Ace Bailey has canceled his scheduled workout with Philadelphia. To this point, it has been reported that Bailey has not done a single workout with a single team. So let's combo this, Fink here. What do you think they do at 3? Who do you think the pick is? And I mean, is it Bailey? And what do you make of the Bailey stuff overall in the context of what's happening this week? And then you having followed this guy and seen what he's been as a rising prospect for, 3+ years at this point.
Yeah, so I talked about this on HQ yesterday, and there's a lot to unpack in this question, right? So let's start with Ace Bailey, who I believe is a top 3 prospect in this class, specifically when it comes to upside. I think his floor is significantly lower than Harper's and obviously Cooper's.
Can I interject real quick here? Is it fair to say of the guys that are in the 3 to 6 conversation, this is my opinion, tell me if you disagree or agree, Tre Johnson, Bailey, VJ Edgecombe, and I'm going to throw Knueppel in there. No one has a higher ceiling but a lower floor of those 4 players than Ace Bailey. He's got the widest variance. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think I think that's a true statement. I will. So the thing with Ace is represented by Omar Cooper, who was Sharif Cooper's dad, and Sharif, he used to run his AAU program. So this has been someone who he's been around for years. Now, the narratives coming out of NBA circles is that he wasn't prepared for his interviews in Chicago, and that now he won't work out for people. So they're frankly they're annoyed by that. What you have to wonder, and so what has generated momentum is like, oh, this new agent doesn't know what he's doing. And I think that's kind of the narrative that a lot of these NBA people are perpetuating. And maybe that's the case. I don't know. But maybe there's a plan there. And maybe they know where they want him to end up. Maybe they want him to get to a place where they know he's going to be able to start from day one and get the volume to really flourish. Because ultimately the money in the NBA doesn't come from your rookie deal. You make less if you go, say, 7th rather than 3rd, but the money comes in your second contract. So if you get to a place where you're going to have the opportunity to play through your mistakes, it could really benefit. Now, if I'm Philadelphia, I still take him. Here's why. I do think he has the top 3 upside. I think he's a top 3 prospect, and I think his upside is significant. There's been a lot of talk about Philadelphia's trying to win now. Ace Bailey's not equipped to do that. And while that may be true, I also think we're nearing the point where, Philadelphia may consider a reset. Is Embiid ever going to be able to stay consistently healthy? They just went all in on Paul George, but he's not getting any younger. And if you have to do, let's call it a soft reset where you don't totally tank, getting a high upside prospect is really notable, because as long as you've got like Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, you might not have a top 3 pick for a long time. So this may be your only bite at the apple. That's why I'm still taking Ace Bailey. And Daryl Morey, and I think John made this point, Givony made this point this morning, is that Daryl Morey has proven in the past that he's willing to draft players who don't work out for him. Now, so that's the Ace Bailey thing. If they are interested in finding a player who can make the most immediate impact to winning, I actually think Knueppel's the guy. I don't think I would draft him at 3, but I think there's a market, and I think that they're entertaining this market to move down. And you could see, like we've talked about, Charlotte, do they want VJ? Would they want to move up? Could Philadelphia trade down to 4, pick up another asset and get Khan? Could they trade down to 5 or 6, pick up another asset or 2 and get Khan, the guy who's able to come right in and make the most immediate impact and fit their rotation? Because they've got Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain in the backcourt. And I think Khan's best position, specifically defensively, is at the 3. So I think that's on the board. VJ is also on the board because even though there's a little bit of a positional overlap there with Tyrese and Jared, he's an alpha competitor. when you're picking in the top 3, you just take the best prospect available and you don't worry so much about position. So if they think VJ or Tre, for that matter, is the 3rd best prospect, I think both of those guys are in the mix. So that's a long-winded way of saying I think there are 4 prospects on the board. I think the pick is on the table for those who are interested in trading for it. I even think they would explore trading up and going after somebody like Dillon. That had been reported in previous weeks. So I think there's a lot of plausible scenarios with 6 days before the draft for Philadelphia.
My intel, which could be outdated in 15 minutes, obviously, is that the trade stuff is very interesting. Ace, Edgecombe, feel there. Doesn't seem like Philly is sweet on Tre Johnson, but keep in mind this is Daryl Morey, so just keep that in mind. And with that being said, it feels like there's whatever the vibe may be going into next Wednesday with Philly. The opportunity for some level of surprise seems to be on the table. Let's keep it moving. Marcus asks if the Hornets don't move back, and we're not going to go pick by pick in the lottery here, I promise, but this is just the order of the questions. If the Hornets don't move back, where do they go with the 4th pick? So I'll even reinterpret this for you, Fink. Who is your prediction when we get to, and Nada, a Hornets fan himself on the pod here? I want Nada to answer this as well. So first, Fink, predict 6 days from now, who are the Hornets drafting? Who will it be?
VJ Edgecombe's the player at the top of their board. I expect he's the player who should be at the top of their board. But I don't like the Ace Bailey fit. I actually understood why his representation didn't want to work out in Charlotte. I don't think that would be a good fit for player or team. I think Khan would be just fine. And Tre fits from a position standpoint, but that's a whole lot of non-defending shot jackers who don't pressure the rim when you put him next to Ball and Miller. So I think VJ is the guy who makes the most sense. But let me just clarify. Nada isn't just like a Charlotte fan. Nada is in the know. That should be the name of the podcast. Nada is
That's actually good. Nada in the know. Nada in the weeds. All right, Nada. Who do you want Charlotte to select? Who will Charlotte select? Are those 2 different people?
They're absolutely 2 different people. I would tell you I want Tre Johnson. I think the shot making is a big thing. I do think they're going to go Knueppel. I think they'll go Knueppel even over VJ Edgecombe for some reason.
Okay. I think Knueppel to me is a player who is going to be able to one, he is on my will not fail no matter what list. And I have maybe 4 players on that list this season, 2 of them being Duke players, obviously Flag being the other. And he's just well-rounded, great shooter, incredible footwork, really solid defender and smart defender, quick learner. Any situation you put him into, I don't know how impactful he'll be as a rookie, but he's not going to get lost in the mix. And no matter the franchise, like some players are very dependent, as almost anyone at the NBA level will tell you, there are always players in the lottery even that are dependent upon the situation they're drafted into, the coaching staff, sometimes the city they go to. There's a lot of factors that can impact their level of success. And then there are other players that for any number of reasons are just, they're built to be able to thrive almost no matter the environment they get drafted into. And I consider Knueppel to be one of those players. Going to Charlotte would certainly be intriguing and also add a little bit of a wrinkle to the top 5, top 6, how it plays out overall. Let's keep it moving here. Frank Whitehead asks, seems like Carter Bryant's stock has only gone up since the season ended. What's the highest he could go and what would be the best fit for his development? So kind of tying into what I just talked about, Fink.
By the way, we've been on this for 33 minutes, and I just noticed that you named yourself Draft Norlander for this one.
Yeah, I'm in Draft Norlander season. For the next week, I'm not Matt Norlander. I'm Draft Norlander. That's right.
Welcome to the show, Adam. So Carter Bryant's stock, I've had him mocked to Houston at 10 for a long time, and when I first started doing that, it seemed really aggressive because the guy averaged 6 points and 4 rebounds per game last year for Arizona. And now I think there's a chance. I don't think it's likely, but I think there's a chance. I would say the highest he could go is 7 or 8. NBA folks love.
7? I know you're not saying it's likely, but you think there's a conceivable world where Carter Bryant goes all the way to 7?
I do. I think there is I think there's a chance. I don't think it's likely. I still think 10 is where I'm going to have him mocked.
We agree.
But I will tell you, NBA people love him. And as I said, when you get outside, like at a certain point, You're just looking for players who can play a certain role. And Carter Bryant, there's not a whole lot of 3-and-D wings in this class. And Carter Bryant is the best one. And it's one where like that archetype is one of the most valuable in the NBA. And let me just tell you, 7, like you tell me the Pelicans couldn't use a 3-and-D wing. I know they got Trey Murphy, but everybody can use a 3-and-D wing. Yeah. Like Cleveland couldn't use a 3-and-D wing. Like sure they could. Toronto couldn't use a 3-and-D wing. Of course they could. So especially if they're going to deal some of these guys. So I don't think that's likely, but the question was like, what's the highest he could go? I think the highest is 7. What team would be the best fit for his development? I think I would really like Houston, as I said. I think with Ime Udoka there, a coach who really values defense, and a need for some floor spacing there when you've got Sengun who doesn't shoot, when you've got Amen Thompson who doesn't shoot. Carter Bryant, I think, would fit there. Now and there's also like a really good chance that Houston has a consolidation trade in their future because they have so many young assets, and they're a team that's still trying to figure out if they have their long-term alpha already in-house, like if somebody's going to grow into that role, or if they have to go out and trade for one. And if they have to go out and trade for one, a number of those young assets will be moving on.
All right, I want to do a real quick follow-up here with you, just because there are people watching, listening that are going to see this. Carter Bryant averaged 6.5 points, 4.1 rebounds. He played fewer than 20 minutes per game last season. And this isn't a case where a guy is a one-and-done player and it's like, okay, well, he's going to have top 10 stock because he was the number 3 ranked player or the number 6 ranked player in his class. He was a 4-star prospect. So in a paragraph's worth of explanation, Fink, why is someone like Carter Bryant rising like this? And is it an indictment on the Arizona staff that they did not play him more, that his numbers weren't better, that he didn't get more time on the floor? What, how could it be that a guy that played that little at the Big 12 level and has the stats that he has is nonetheless on a track to be a top 10 pick?
So I think it's a credit to the Arizona staff that he's going to be a top 10 pick, because the difference between, let's put it on me, right? Is it an indictment on me that he was ranked 24th and he might get drafted 10th? Like that's, and what I would tell you is the difference between that is the shooting. He shot the ball much better at Arizona than he did in high school. And I actually talked to him about this at the combine, and we like created a little video that on social media about him talking about the work that staff did to extend his shooting range out to the 3-point line. So I think if anything, they deserve credit. And I would also make this point, like there is something to be said. You look at Carter Bryant, you look at Jace Richardson, these guys who look at Steph Castle a year ago, who play somewhat supporting roles in their first year in college, and see both their development and their draft stock skyrocket, versus those who are given kind of complete freedom as they come in as a freshman, end up just exposing some of their warts and see their draft stock diminish. I don't know that kids coming into college have a full appreciation for that. Sometimes it's better to keep people guessing. And I think there's, as I mentioned, those names, I think there's a definite history to prove that. So I think it's a credit to the Arizona staff and a credit to the gains he's made specifically as a shooter and his willingness to embrace the defensive end of the floor.
Next question. An Arkansas fan asked, do you think Adou Therio will keep John Calipari's streak of first-round picks going? Here is the info on that. So while obviously at Kentucky, Calipari had a first-round pick every single season he was there. He had 5 in year 1. He never topped that or matched it. Wall, Cousins, Patterson, Bledsoe, and yes, Daniel Orton way back in the day in 2010. But most seasons he had at least 2 first-round picks. It's slowed. I say it's slowed. It did a little bit in this final 4 years. A year ago, Reed Shepherd, obviously number 3 pick. Dillingham went. Year before that, just Casey Wallace doing all right for himself. Shaden Sharp the year before that as well. But he's now at Arkansas, and Thero's on his roster. Will Therio be a first-round pick and keep this going? Kentucky, by the way, at risk. I would say almost definitely. With Cal gone now, the streak will end for Kentucky. Although I will add, I am higher on Kobe Brea than I think most. I think he's got the build and the shooting to stick and play through multiple contract cycles, but I don't think he'll be a first-round pick. Will Adou Therio be a first-round pick, Fink?
Unlikely, not impossible. If he is on the surface, he's more of a second round pick. He benefits from the amount of guys who went back to college and the lack of depth, which we've already talked about. Even that, having said that, his chances of being a first round pick come down to his ability to convince NBA teams that he's going to be able to shoot. There's not much in his numbers or his tape from this point that will convince people. So ultimately, it will mean that he has like a really good workout, and some coaching staff or front office says, you know what, we think he's going to be able to shoot. Because if you think he's going to be able to make standstill threes, then you've got an athletic 3-and-D type asset, and that would be, I think, a first round prospect. But there is less optimism that he can shoot at this point.
Yeah, it feels like he's locked into the second round, anywhere from this is my own projection, 35 to 45. Xavier fan Joe asks, if your son was a borderline second round pick, would you advise him to stay in school for an NIL guarantee? So I'll put the parameters on that, Fink. Let's say you've got a son who's, objectively in the 25 to 35 range. Tell him to stay in the draft, or tell him to go back and get, the NIL world is now shifting again, and with revenue sharing. So the nature of this question is a little bit different moving forward. But let's just say hypothetically, you've got a son who can be set up to make, I'll say $2 million the next year in college basketball, or he could be the 33rd pick in the NBA draft. What would you advise him to do?
Yeah, in 2025, you go back to school, where this money is not speculative as much. Like in 2025, the money was higher than it had ever been, and it was also more. It was also on paper more than it had been in the past. So and you saw this, right? You saw LeBaron Philon, you saw Tahad Pettiford, you saw a lot of these guys go back to school. Cedric Howard was going to go back to school until he realized, like, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to be a mid first round pick. So I think in 2025, the impetus, correctly speaking, was to go back to school. In 2026, with the house settlement and all the ramifications from that, the fallout from that, like, we'll see what it goes. But, I will credit Travis Branham, who just wrote a story yesterday about how the market moving forward is not expected to be quite as robust as it was this season. Obviously, there's still a lot of variables that need to be worked out. But long story short, go back to school in 2025, check back with me in a year about what the earning power of college basketball is in 2026 and how that measures against the NBA draft.
Yeah, GP and I have talked on some of those things in recent podcasts. Parrish remains highly skeptical. That will be maybe the most interesting storyline behind the scenes in college basketball for the next year, is what is the economy of the sport, and does the market really drastically come down or not? That will be intriguing. Truett in Durham writes, I'm loving the Pacers' success this year while also lamenting the Hoosiers' lack thereof. What could and maybe should IU athletic administrators and coaching staff learn from Rick Carlisle and the Pacers? I'm sure that NBA and NCAA programs function differently, but I'm curious what parallels you guys can draw. I'll answer this real quick, Fink, and then send it over to you. They are running a college program and running an NBA franchise are vastly different enterprises altogether. That said, keep in mind that particularly a coach like Rick Carlisle, who has many connections at the college level and knows a lot of these head coaches personally, there can be lessons to be learned, and there are often lessons that are passed down from one level to the next. And the question is obviously asked because you've got two teams in the same state, not that far from each other. And coincidentally enough, when I did a feature on Halliburton, and we published that, I guess, earlier this month or late last month. I can't remember at this point. But anyway, the one thing the Pacers and their players have said kind of consistently is like they kind of operate like a college team, like in terms of the retention, in terms of the atmosphere, environment in the locker room, in terms of the practices and a lot of that stuff. So it was interesting to hear them kind of compare how they've been able to do this with a college-like environment, how that would translate with Darren DeVries. I know we wait and see on all that, but I appreciated the question, and my big picture answer is there are some things that can be applied, but generally speaking, the objectives of an ownership and then a coaching staff and the players on the roster, while everyone wants to win, the functionality of doing that at the college level versus the NBA is pretty different.
Yeah, so I think like you have to. It's the NBA game is so different from the college game, but what I think. Where I think there's a lesson to be learned is in Rick Carlisle's willingness to evolve, right? Like this guy's been an NBA head coach for a long, long time, and yet he's playing a very modern system. And I don't Obviously, that wasn't necessarily the case with the Hoosiers the last couple of years. They had a guy who'd been a head coach for a long, long time who was adamantly set on his ways and even by his own admission, not really willing to evolve. I think it'll be different under Tucker DeVries, but I think where Carlisle, what has given Carlisle his longevity is that willingness to stay current, evolve with the times, and play with incredible pace, a whole lot of three-point shooting. That's not how you won when he first became a head coach, but he's been willing to evolve. And I think that's an important lesson, not just for Indiana, but for any basketball program at any level, to make sure you are staying at the forefront of what's going on in the game.
Kris Karns, who sent a couple questions, but I'm gonna pick one that he actually emailed here. He said, I think it would be an interesting conversation and exercise to look back at the upperclassmen who fell to late first or even second round picks like Brunson or Fred VanVleet and many others. What kind of NBA team could you currently put together if you took guys who didn't have the high ceiling where the current NBA draft values the futures market, and instead take guys that you know what you're going to get? Seeing Clayton now a projected late first round pick, but he's the best current guard in the entire draft. We'll disagree on that. We'll continue. His ceiling might not be as high, but his floor is way higher than others at the moment. I would think coaches would learn from that and know what they're going to get in a player like him. What kind of team could you put together based on, say, all the Villanova guys and Andrew Nembhard and other players? Because you probably could have built a playoff team kind of unit with guys who can play right now. So that's his question, and then I'll just interpret a little bit more. I think what he's getting at here is, why do highly productive and successful college players who are a bit older, and maybe some of them might be undersized, maybe some of them won't, why aren't we seeing at least a little bit of an adjustment in the draft market with guys like that, not, maybe being projected or ultimately selected 5, 7, 10 spots higher than they otherwise would have been? I think this will be in play, Fink, this year old takes expose me. I think Clayton winds up going, we've got him at 31. I don't think he has any business falling past 25, and I will say he goes 22, 23 or better. I think his championship run, I actually think we will have a Jalen Brunson type effect. We'll see if that bears out to be true. But how do you interpret the question there and the general vibe of what Kris sent along?
So if I could, let me first speak to Clayton and then the general theme of the question. First of all, Clayton, I think, is the single most underrated prospect on our big board. And I say that with the caveat. From a scouting perspective, there is no one of the big cardinal rules of March Madness is to not overvalue what you see late. However,
and yet, did you watch this dude?
Well, and yet, here's the thing. And yet, I think what he does, I have him higher on my board, not because of what he did in the NCAA tournament, but because of how his game fits into a more condensed NBA role. Like, he's not going to be the alpha scorer in the NBA. Okay. But what he is one of the very best shooters in this draft. What he is now someone who has proven he has on-off ball versatility, because he played off the ball for 3 years. This year at Florida, Todd Golden put the ball in his hands and he played the point. I'm not saying he's a pure point guard. I'm saying he can play both on and off the ball. That is also very coveted in the NBA. He has a durable, strong body. He was a very good high school football player who had Division I recruitment in football. That's another thing that checks in his favor. The thing that's going to have to really improve is the defense, but the stakes are higher in the NBA. At Florida, he got on the court even with like a sometimes neutral defensive effort. That will not be the – and like, listen, they won the national championship. That's not a criticism. In the NBA, the bar is going to be higher for him defensively. He's going to have to give a more consistent effort, and I think he will. As I alluded to, I think he's got enough size and the strength to be sufficient on that end of the floor. So that's why I have him higher, not because he single-handedly won 3 different games. I mean, people forget they almost lost to UConn in the second round before he went nuts. So it's not about that. It's about the shooting, the on-off ball versatility, the physical strength. And that's why I think he is very clearly a first-round pick. And to me, I'm starting to think about him, and I know this is hot take-ish, at the end of the lottery.
Are you going to say lottery? You are going to say lottery.
I don't think he'll get drafted there, but if I was running a team and I was, if I'm Atlanta, if I'm San Antonio, if I'm Orlando, like, heck yeah, I'm bringing him in. Well, Orlando doesn't have their pick anymore, but like, heck yeah, I'm bringing him in and I'm working him out and I'm seeing how it goes. As to the question about the upperclassmen, and let me just say this: put Nikola Jokic and Jalen Brunson on a team, you'd probably win the championship. So I think there's clearly some steals to be found in the second round. One of the lessons to be learned about the upside swings in recent years, and I do think we're seeing the market start to reset on this, is like the emphasis on undeveloped length and athleticism can be fool's gold, whereas the road less traveled of skill, feel, and size can be where you can find a sleeper. So, and processing ability as well. What did Jalen Brunson and Nikola Jokic have in common? An incredible acumen for the game and extreme skill sets. So that's where I think that you can start to see players who weren't necessarily like Ace Bailey type athletes, but could really think the game at a high level, really play with the ball at a high level. And I do think you're seeing the markets. The fact that Knueppel is being talked about as the third overall pick in the draft is evidence that the market is starting to recalibrate to that front a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's fair. But Knueppel is also, he was a guy who was, projected into the lottery by the time we got to, I want to say like early December. I don't think my memory's failing me there. So it's a little bit different in terms of he's been there. And then, Duke was, by the way, the best team in the country last season. I know Florida fans, but metrically speaking, that's where they rated. Let's get to 3 or 4 more here before we wrap up. Dan Weiner asked, do the Hawks take 2 bites of the apple, or should they try and package their picks and trade up? So not what you think they will do. If you were running Atlanta right now, Fink, what would you do?
Well, it's predicated on what they're going to do with Trae Young. Are they building around Trae Young, or are they moving Trae Young? Right now, it looks like they're building around him, so I would make 2 picks to try and support him as best I could. I thought it was ironic that the Hawks made a change in their management this year, because I thought they've added some really nice pieces and specifically some kind of big 2-way wings. Mm-hmm. But, it is all predicated. What are we doing with Trae Young? If we're keeping him, we're building around him, and we better pick accordingly. If we're moving him, then we need to take some swings. So that's my answer there. It's the
Hawks have the 13th and 22nd pick in my mock. I have Yegor Demin going at 13, big point guard. I might be a little ambitious there. And then I mentioned this earlier, I had Beringer to Atlanta 22. He will not be there by the time we get to 22. So we'll see. We'll see in that regard. Next question. CGWami asks, with the transfer portal creating greater incentive for NCAA programs to collect, rent, and retain more refined talent, has it become tougher for NBA scouts to find and evaluate potential projects beyond the known freshmen? With NCAA rosters shrinking, what's the best path for quote-unquote projects to develop?
Has it become tougher? Yes, but it's not impossible. Again, like I think abroad is still there's plenty of secrets, and sometimes these secrets are hiding in plain sight. Look at somebody like Jimmy Butler. It's about like, can they take the role they played in college? It's very rare that you're going to play the same role in the NBA that you played in college. That's why the archetype of the athletic rim running big is an easy transition, because the role stays the same. So finding value comes down to finding someone who you think is going to have more success playing in a different role, or who you think is going to have like accelerated growth in an area of his game that hasn't happened yet. So if you think Colin Murray Boyles is going to be able to shoot long term, then you have him much higher on your board. And if he does shoot, you will be right. Things like that. So I think the names are more well-known at this point, but ultimately this is the reason why there's still sleepers to be had is because the unexpected outcomes are a result of unexpected progress in their games, very rarely on previously unknown prospects popping up. Like, even for everybody who was a second round pick and hit, the Nikola Jokic's, the Jalen Brunsons, it wasn't that they were unknown. It's that no one foresaw the level of growth. I can't think of an example. I'm sure there is one, but of someone who was undrafted becoming a star. Like, these guys were all known. They just, their rate of improvement was far more accelerated than anyone anticipated.
Fair enough. Andy Thompson asks, where do you guys stand on Ryan Kalkbrenner's draft stock? Have seen so many varying opinions over the past few weeks and I think he's one of the most undervalued prospects this year. Where do I stand on Kalkbrenner's stock? I think appropriately slotted at this point, and I think his stock falls in the 25 to 33 range right now. At least that's the perception that I've received. And obviously, I think if you go and look at mock drafts, he's going to be in that range. We have him 27 on our overall prospect ranks. He's interesting in this regard. He's a true center. He's one of the best defensive players to come out of college basketball as a big in the past 10 to 15 to 20 to 25 years. I mean, 4-time defensive player of the year in the Big East. Really, like, his ability to really tilt the floor and alter what college offenses were trying to do was undeniable, and that could be seen on the tape. But then I remember talking to a couple opposing coaching staffs, and they would agonize in a playful way over just like how much of a massive headache he presented in his ability to be able to really to muck things up on that end. I still don't think as a big he was ultimately as productive as he should. Now, he was let me be clear. He was a very, very good college player, obviously. I actually thought he still had another level up to become even more dominant, and he didn't hit that level. And so I think because of that, because there's a real lack of offensive output that's projected at the next level. That's why you're not seeing someone who on the defensive end is as great as he is projected even higher. I think he's destined to go somewhere mid to late 20s, if not maybe early 30s. But if I'm a team sitting there between 25 and 30 and he's on the board and I have a real need for defensive presence, like a good backup big, I definitely would take a swing. He's we get into the things that go into a franchise and their draft boards and evaluating prospects, and a variety of different things kind of matter. To some things matter to some people and matter more to them than others. But like Ryan Kalkbrenner has been married for over he's a full-grown adult. Like, he has been living he is ready to take this next step into his professional career. And my understanding is a lot of the background check stuff is going to really it's going to pass significantly so, and he'll rightfully be drafted mid to late first round. What are your thoughts on Kalk?
You said mid to late first round there. You meant
I meant late. Yeah. Sorry, mid to late 20s, not mid to late first round. So
yeah, I would say late first round, early second. I would say this. Almost every NBA team strives to have someone like Kalkbrenner on their roster, just a giant in the middle. So some of it is going to be situational. Like, do they already have one of him? If they do, they probably won't be interested. It's also going to be teams that prefer to play drop coverage are going to be more interested in him than others. Although I will say I think his defensive versatility is somewhat underrated. I've talked a few different times now about like the Marquette game where he's out switching on the Cam Jones and like having more success than you would think. But nonetheless, the basis is going to be a team that plays drop coverage. Think like a Walker Kessler type. Offensively, I will say this. If he shoots, there's going to be clear value. Even if not, if he can, provide that efficient finisher, that offensive rebounder again, like Kalkbrenner, that's of value. The other thing I don't think we're talking about enough is that at Creighton, he has experience playing in a very sophisticated playbook. So he's going to be able to come in and run wherever he goes. He's not going to have any problem running any of your stuff. And that's something that a lot of players, especially bigs, have to adapt to. Kalkbrenner is going to be great in that area. So, I think and finally, the fact that so many guys went back to school, because Ryan Kalkbrenner's prospectus this year isn't that different that long-term than it was a year ago, than it was 2 years ago, but he's benefiting from the fact that the market has less depth from 25 to 35 this year than it has in recent years.
That's a good point. And I don't think he should fall out of the first. If he does, it won't surprise me. It will purely because of hesitation when it comes to his offensive versatility or lack thereof. One last question, then we'll get out of here. Thomas Dowdle wants to know, who is the second round prospect with the most long-term upside? It's an intriguing question given everything that we talked about near the start of the show. While I look at projected second round prospects and I see a couple like, okay, we'll see. I'm not overwhelmed by options here. I'm going to repeat a name I gave you about 10 minutes ago. I think Kobe Bryant, if he gets into the right situation on the right kind of scheme and offense with the right coaching staff, I think that he can hit, and he can be a guy that can step in, come off the bench, and be a someone who grows into, you know, a 43% 3-point shooter at the NBA level and be a real weapon. He would be my most likely. Chaz Lanier's not that far behind, frankly. I think he's got some real capability there as well. But who was the guy for you? Any second round prospect? You know, it doesn't have to be someone knocking on the door first round. I think if there's someone that you think's got that 45 or lower kind of grade that you're in on more than anyone else, I'm interested to hear 1 or 2 names from you.
Yeah, so I agree with you on Kobe Bryant. My thing in the second round is who's an NBA player, and I don't mean that facetiously. I mean, like, legitimately, who are you sure is an NBA player? Kobe Bryant, I'm pretty sure is an NBA player. Cam Jones, I'm pretty sure is an NBA player. Janai Broom, I think has a future in the NBA, is just like a physical banger who can also like play out of dribble handoffs and pass a little bit more than we thought a year or so ago. I think the 2 Duke guys, Sion James and Tyrese Proctor, are also NBA players.
I find myself higher on Proctor as we get closer to the draft than I thought I would think.
Yeah. The last name I will give you, though, because the question was upside, which to me implies like who's got the high is related to ceiling. I will give the name I will give you there is and he could very well go in the first round. Ben Saraf, I believe. Big 6'5", 6'6", lefty, primary initiator. One of, if not the best live dribble passer in the draft. So he's got size, he's got strength, he's got creativity and floor vision. So highest ceiling of someone who could slip to the second round, I think he's in that conversation. The 5 or so players I mentioned from college basketball who I think are NBA players, I would also say if it's like, highest floor in the second round, they would be in the discussion for me.
Yeah, that second round, I feel like it's going to be even a little bit more of a free-for-all than normal there. But I appreciate you hopping on the show. Appreciate everyone that sent in questions. We don't do, this is kind of a different kind of show. We don't do an NBA draft mailbag every year, but we might try and institute and work this in the years to come moving forward. I appreciate you hopping on. Doing a little relief pitching work while GP's enjoying a vacation. GP will be back next week. Me, him, and KB, Kyle Boone, are going to do a mock draft pod episode. Fink's going to have his mock draft go up Monday. There'll be a special on CBS Sports Network with Fink's mock draft, an hour long. Be on the lookout for that. He's obviously part of our HQ draft coverage as well. Just tremendous insight, and I mean it, man. You're as well-rounded, balanced, and objective as pretty much anyone that does this. So it's awesome to have you on our team, and I appreciate you adding to the discourse and certainly upping the intelligence quotient on this podcast.
That's very kind of you to say. I'm always happy to be on with you guys. You know that.
Dig it. Well, thanks for everyone for watching, listening. Please subscribe to the show if you're not already. We've got some more draft content coming from you in the next week or so. And appreciate this so much. We will talk to you again with our mock draft episode on Monday. Me, GP, and KB. Until then, take care.